Here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian. I'm here with Allison, and this is, another Fundzerker request from one of our supporters. We're going to be looking at a video interview between Louise Perry, who you guys might remember from the trigonometry video that we looked at earlier this week, and someone we haven't heard from in a long time, Cassie J, the director of the Red Pill documentary. So it should be interesting because Cassie has been kind of out of the public light for a while. And this is like I don't want to say it's her return, because I think that she's kind of making it a point to sort of lay low, and I understand that. But yeah, so we got some
important things to do. She's
got kids to raise, and a family and all that, so no time for all this drama.
I think she also came out of her semi-retirement to talk on Dr. Phil. You remember that?
Yeah, I don't know how old that was.
I don't know how it was. It must have been pretty old. It was after Angelucci, Mark Angelucci's
passed away. Yeah. So that's a couple of years ago at least, but I don't know how old that is. I know that it was on Warren Farrell's channel recently.
Yes.
But it's hard to know whether or not,
put out,
like when it was, not only when it was put out, but when it was shot, because a lot of times they'll shoot these things and then you won't see it for like a year, and then so
it pops out of nowhere. But I just love that moment where you see on Warren Farrell's face, he's just like, there's no salvaging this. There's no these are not serious people, and he's just like, he's trying to get those last words in before the camera pans away from him. Remember that?
Yep. It's the best you can hope for, really, is to like drop just a little, like, hey, little red pill, sprinkle in something, and then just like walk away.
Yeah.
So
Warren Farrell and Cassie J are the two nicest people on this side of the pond, or the side of the chasm. I think you could say they're on this side of the chasm with us.
Yeah.
Reprobates. At the very least,
yeah, for sure.
On this side of the chasm with us reprobates, by the usual suspects. But yeah, so in this video, Cassie is covering a lot of the backlash she got against having done the Red Pill. If you guys don't know, the Red Pill is a documentary on the men's rights movement. It's sort of circa 2014,
17. Well, she started it probably but I think it came out around 2015, 2016. Well, yeah, because in 2017 we were in Australia.
Yeah.
And that was when she went on the Australian media, and that was like a big thing.
And it was they treated her terribly, just awful. And I think we actually predicted that in a cartoon that we put out prior to her Australian tour. The reporter who is reporting on her work says, we have to censor you for the Australian public and public S.
Yeah.
And I think that we actually did that before what happened in Australia because it's easy to predict, right? Australia is one of the most
very easy to predict, very
feminist, like controlled media environments.
Yeah, most places are pretty paused. Like that's pretty much a given.
Australia is one of the worst. It's
which is crazy, because I thought Australians were like hardy people descended from like hardened criminals or something. Like, imagine like if in the environment from Escape from New York, and if that was allowed to persist, and they were like children, and over a number of generations they all of a sudden become like really woke and soft. It's weird. But
I think it's like more the urban. But what I wanted to say was the Red Pill is a documentary on men's rights advocacy, men's issues advocacy from about 2014. It came out in 2016. So it has me in it. It has Karen in it. So people who are interested, and Paul, and also Mark Angelucci, I believe, was in it. Which
Harry Crouch. I think Bettina Arndt was in it a little bit. Yeah,
the OGs.
Lots of the OGs.
And it's sort of like a little time capsule of all the things that could have been dealt with then, and we wouldn't be dealing with what we're dealing with now. You know?
Yep.
I mean, even Shoe on Head pointed that out. It's like, way back when they were just concerned about fairness in family courts and recognizing male victims of false accusation and sexual assault, and now look what it is. Oh man. And yeah, so it's just it's nice to see her again, to see her actually talking about these issues and just know that she's still around, really. But yeah. Oh, anyway, so let's get into it, because she's talking about her trials and tribulations trying to bring attention to issues.
Sure, let's do the things first.
Oh, right, you're right. Thank you for reminding me, because I would have forgotten to do the things. All right, so if you want to send us a message at any point throughout the show that you want us to respond to, you can do so at feedthebadger.com/justthetip. If there's anything you'd like to comment on, we'll be sure to give that a read and a cogitation. So once again, that's feedthebadger.com/justthetip. We get the full benefit of whatever funds you send, and you get the full benefit of not sending your comment through YouTube's back rooms. Have you played that game?
No.
It's creepy. It's really creepy.
Yeah.
It's quite creepy. So anyway, that's the deal. Send it to feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And if you would like to support the show, go to feedthebadger.com/support. Very obvious URL, feedthebadger.com/support. And that makes sure that we are able to get the funds necessary to continue this very good show. All right, let's get started. I think
all right, let's get into the video, and this is, I think, time code 1633. So
I don't think it's going to go anywhere. But I do think the anger, like the very visceral anger that came out of the mainstream media that were reporting on the film, that's what got the ball rolling. And I guess that's why they say any press is good press, because it's like a lot of the really bad press we got early on that weren't necessarily attacking the film. It was attacking the idea behind the film. It wasn't actually the filmmaking itself.
Yeah, of course. Because I'm just pausing for the banana just to make sure that we're safe on that. But
yeah, I think we will.
Yes, they found the premise of even making the film ridiculous, and that was what was essentially so controversial. Anyway,
well, I mean, it goes against the power narrative. I was talking before when we were talking about Louise Perry and the previous episode that we covered of trigonometry. It's the power narrative. It's the narrative that men oppress women and society is made for men's benefit, and that actually constructs a narrative of controlling men. So controlling their identity, controlling what they take a sense of worth from, and all of that. It's all about that control. And the one thing that is actual counter evidence to the quote patriarchy narrative is men's issues. Because regardless if men are in power, if the situation for women is better than the situation for men as a result of men being in power, then men are not oppressing women. Full stop. So when you look at the situation for men, which are men's issues, right? That's the situation for men. It's basically looking at how society treats men. And when you look at that and you say, oh, wow, when you start to recognize it, you have to bring it into that equation, and then it just destroys the narrative. Because again, if the situation for men is better or worse than the situation for women, then even though men are in power or are in authority or are in positions of expectation and responsibility, that doesn't mean that women are less or worse off because of it, right? The two do not follow. So the whole documentary that she was presenting, and she was presenting things that she earnestly and honestly believed in, right? She felt that these were issues that needed attention. And I mean, I think in particular, the issues in circumcision really got to her. So infant genital autonomy or like not cutting into the genitals of boys. And I don't care.
Yeah.
Like you can look at it like this. Whatever you think of that you're cutting off of a boy when you take him to be circumcised, think of cutting that off a girl. Does that work for you? And the answer is no. No matter what, we would not accept it. You know, we would not accept cutting something off a girl, especially without anesthetic. And yet that's what we routinely do to boys. And this is the issue that really got to her. She has a genuine concern about these issues. I believe she's a very genuine, like, she has compassion, and her compassion led her to be concerned about these issues. And I imagine, like me at one point, I thought society was just, well, they just don't know, you know? They just don't realize the extent of it. We just bring attention to it and people will care. And then you hit the wall of fury and contempt, like the overreaction. And then you have to ask, well, why? Why are they reacting to this degree? Why are they reacting in such an intensely negative way to even bringing up these issues? You know, and that's really what starts people on this path of questioning these institutional narratives and what they're actually doing. And then the true epic black hole pill is realizing that they don't even care about women.
No.
They don't even care about women. Women are just ciphers for the narrative to them.
Yeah, it's just a method.
Yeah,
it's the avenue to power, and that means that they have to 100% know that the oppression narrative is a lie, because if the oppression narrative were true, women couldn't be used as a vessel to gain power and resources, and yet they do. Right? Yeah, exactly. They don't even have to be real harms. They could be like presumed harms, perceived harms, narratives about harm, and it's enough to motivate men and women to like rush to that and plant a flag there and say, this is something we care about. And they know that. So they have to, this is what I'm saying. They're not stupid. They're lying. they know it works. So, but anyway.
Look at the structure of it. It's like we exist in a society that doesn't care. This is the narrative. We exist in a society that doesn't care about harms against women. Now I'm going to use a narrative that appeals to people that care about harms against women. It just doesn't compute. It's self-contradictory. It's its own and counter argument. All right.
All right. Let's play some more of the video. Yeah.
It's what made people want to then watch it, to have a debate. And I love that. That's why I went into documentary filmmaking to begin with, was I just wanted to share a different perspective, not necessarily preach any message of my own, but let it be a conversation starter. And, one of my favorite things I do with the people I love in my life is we just have really deep philosophical conversations about anything, but we like to play devil's advocate. And
all right, I think I went a little over the time code, but I will say that having spent a little bit of time with Cassie, I remember we were all like, it was like after ICMI 2018, I think. So it was in London, and it was after all of the the days of presentations, and we were just like having drinks and dinner. And I was fortunate enough to sit at the table with Cassie and her husband. I don't know if they were married yet. I think they were, though, at that point. I know he was a fiance, kind of like for a long period of time. She wasn't sure if she wanted to marry him or have kids, because she was still like feminist brained. And then after she did her thing, and then she was like, yeah, I decided I'm going to marry this guy and I'm going to have kids with him. And now she's a mother and she's very happy about it. But I remember us having some pretty deep conversations that day. And I could tell that it was something that excited her. And I have to say that, like, this is the thing I love about Lindsay, is that we have the best conversations. Like every morning we're having coffee and talking about really deep stuff, assuming there's time, So yeah, I appreciate that. It's like, I don't know, it's kind of like, it's peaceful, even if if the conversation can get a little bit, I don't even want to say antagonistic, but disagreeable, but I'm usually right though, so it's okay. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Anyway,
you know what's really great about this is that she escaped from the narrative.
Yeah, that's right. She's free. It's true.
And when you're free as a woman, you're free to structure your life in whatever way you feel benefits you and hopefully, you know, also your family. And actually, because that's really when you escape the narrative, you learn that benefiting your partner, benefiting your family is not a bad thing. So you're free to do it, and you're free to take that positive sense of self from being of service to others. And I think that that's like the big thing for I think that's what we see with her. Like that's she has said that it improved her relationship to let go of this baggage, you know, and I think it allowed her to move on in her life and to arrange her life in the way that she felt was best for her, as opposed to just in a way that was appropriate as a cipher for, well, a cipher for the institutions.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so let's go ahead to the next time code.
Wait,
not much.
It's not much.
Yeah, that's the end. No, that's it. Finished it. Okay. I will jump to 1819 right here.
Or maybe I would find it would make me angry or something like that. You know, not.
This is Louise Perry reflecting on having watched the movie herself. Mm-hmm. So just so you know what the context is.
Not the fact of the film or anything, but just their sort of listening to their arguments. It didn't make me feel angry, and I think the film is balanced, and I think it does a good job. And you hear from like people at Erin Pizzi are very interesting to hear from. You know, I think it's a good film. The men's rights activist arguments, they kind of they gave me the ick. That was the physical response I had from it. And I spoke actually to a male friend this morning about this because he's also seen the film. We were talking.
I want to pause it there for a second. Okay. To be charitable to Louise Perry, I think that she's talking about a gut reaction when she says the ick. I think that for anybody, even men too, to watch the red pill and see men that are presented as vulnerable or affected or victimized by these systems, I think it's going to make us all uncomfortable. That's what she's saying, right? Mm-hmm. So it's fair. Now, I think using the ick is, you know, it's coded, I guess, as like a weird female thing because nowadays all kinds of shit gives women the ick, and to the point where it's like it's very easy to dismiss. Mm-hmm. But I think in the case of her reaction to this movie, it's good that she had that feeling, because I think it's normal for most people. If I showed it to like my father, he would probably have a similar reaction. Like, what do you mean? You know? Mm-hmm. But also her acknowledgement that it's irrational, because ultimately that is what she's saying. I don't know. I think it makes sense as well.
Okay.
So
I wanted to point something out because it occurred to me while I'm listening to this. People say, okay, the current crop of feminist reflections of manhood, I'm not even going to say their names because they're just a current crop of basically reactions to feminist framing of manhood and our society's contempt towards men who have needs. I mean, basically all they're doing is trying to abide by women's desire not to see men's vulnerability, because like I trust her when she says that she has the ick, and I trust that that is the visceral response of most women.
Yeah.
To men having vulnerabilities and men having weaknesses. Now imagine men knowing this, men knowing that women have political power and their inherent response to men's needs is disgust. Right? Now, what kind of reaction is that going to be? Like if you were a woman and you knew that the more power men gain and they have an absolute disgust response to your vulnerability, to your weakness. Like if you were a woman and you start crying in front of a man, he just sneers at you and walks away, you know, and it's just like the instant you look vulnerable as a woman, you know that you lose all sexual value as a woman. And then you see men gaining political power. Well, how would that feel? Like, you know, that men have no inherent, like it's hard for women to imagine that. Like they try to pretend like that's actually true, but it isn't. That's why they use all these narratives of being damsels, of being afraid of all those other men, of saying, oh, I'd rather choose the bear. Well, you'd rather choose the bear because the man listening to you actually cares. Let's be honest. You say that because the man listening cares. And
yeah, you're hoping to use it against him emotionally, and it works.
Yeah, and it works. So imagine, and I don't hear men saying things like this, that women's vulnerability gives them the ick.
Mm-hmm.
Like the moment a woman looks vulnerable, they are completely demotivated to have anything to do with them. I mean, it would be an interesting society that if that was the case. And it certainly isn't. Because you can even look at popular media. What's the simplest plot line that they use in games all the time? Just save the princess. Because she's vulnerable, she needs you. That's the easiest plot line. It's the one that feminists constantly call out as being ubiquitous. You know, so they recognize that exists, that affectations of female vulnerability motivate men. They don't demotivate men. A man doesn't look at a woman who's vulnerable and you know, just like, I don't want to have anything to do with her. She's become disgusting and has lost all of her sexual appeal. All of it. Like she's a non-person now because she's vulnerable. And yet that's what men have to deal with. And you wonder why the more society demonstrates this fact, the more women demonstrate this fact, the more men become hardliners when it comes to giving women any kind of political clout over them. Like, think about it.
Yeah.
You gotta fix the ick, lady. You gotta fix that ick.
Oh yeah, I know. Well, like I said, I think that she's talking about her gut reaction when she first saw it, but I think she's a little bit more favorable later. So
you know what?
Go ahead.
When I listen to this, it just makes me feel very strange. I mean, sometimes I do slightly get the same kind of reaction, but for the most part, I don't. When I see men suffering in some way, like not if they're presenting it in the same way that women do, that can sort of give me that feeling. But when you know a guy's suffering, because they don't present the way women do, they don't ball up their fists, they don't have a tantrum like a child, they don't cry, they don't get red and snotty. Men tend to just be very quiet and still when they're in pain. And you know, I have a reaction to that, and it's not the ick. So I just wonder if maybe I'm just supremely weird. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you are. Okay, let's play the rest of this.
And he said they also kind of gave him the ick in the same way.
So she said she showed it to a man and it gave him the same feeling. That's kind of what I'm getting. Like, this is just something, you know, first of all, it's challenging fundamental beliefs that we are all expected to hold. So that's one thing. The other thing too, I think, is that despite the fact that people want to pretend as though men and women don't fall into certain roles in society, either naturally or because of some cultural push to do so, when you see women in a weakened state, you think that it's almost like, you know, that there's an attack on like on like, you know, like think of it like a ship. Like there's something happening in the barracks, something that's happening in the hearth. That's a problem we need to address because this is the thing we're trying to protect. And so you rush to protect it. But when it happens to a man, it's almost like there's like the whole integrity, you know, like there's like the ring of protection is showing weakness. And this might make men uncomfortable because now they're like, oh crap, you know, like how are we going to defend our women if men are in this state? But it also makes women uncomfortable because now they're feeling like they're more vulnerable because, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, the perimeter is weakened, right? And that's what I think there's she wouldn't say this word for word, but I think that there's a gut reaction that says that, right? So, and we want to continue going on as though nothing is wrong on the perimeter, everything is fine. But it's, you know, while men are still keeping things going, it's not as, let's say, impenetrable as we were led to believe, or at least these people. And I think that's one of the reasons too. If that makes sense, I don't know. Okay, anyway.
Okay. And I I think what's going on there, and I want to ask you in a second, how you feel about some of these positions now, 8 years on, is I think that it's really hard for men to, what men's rights activism kind of does is like flip the script on feminism. It says, okay, if you care about gender equality and treating men and women equally, here are all the ways where we fall short on that, and here are all the ways in which men are disadvantaged and so on. And like in the statistics and stuff, they're not wrong. Mostly, I kind of disagree with the domestic violence stuff, but in general, they're not wrong.
That's probably because of the data she's got is the regular data that everybody else has. But the one thing that Pearl gets right is that she says that, and we've said this too, like studies or statistics on issues like domestic violence and rape and so on, they're not useful because they only measure women. They don't measure men. So you can't make any claims about any of this stuff because we frankly just don't have good data, because whenever studies are conducted, they are conducted primarily because they're trying to look at how these things are affecting women. So it colors the outcomes are shifted or altered by that, because the premise is, oh, how badly are women affected in domestic violence, without asking like the situation for men at all. So of course she's going to say that. I think, if she's got integrity, she will remain open to the possibility that she's wrong, but she doesn't go into her like any specifics on the domestic violence front. So I'm not sure that it's super useful to, unless you want to say something about this anyway.
Domestic violence is not gendered. Sexual assault is not gendered. It's just not. And we need to replace all of our statistics that we currently have, which are ideologically motivated, and redo it, all of it. With non-ideologically motivated researchers. And then we'll have an accurate picture of prevalence. But even with ideologically motivated researchers, we are still finding enough evidence that neither domestic violence nor sexual assault is gendered, that we cannot, in good conscience, the idea of blaming men for these two social ills is horrific. It is abysmal behavior. And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of people fight so hard against the red pill and have such a reaction to it. Because nobody wants to know that you are, in fact, a horrible person.
Like how horribly wrong you are about everything that you have invested your time and money and effort into.
And it is horrible. There is very little that I have seen that anybody has brought up about the treatment of women that compares to blaming men for domestic violence and sexual assault. Like there's, at that point, you are stripping humanity from men. You are engaging in presenting wartime the equivalent of wartime propaganda against men. It is horrific, and it is based on a lie. And I just don't know what to say. Like I can't have any sense of respect for institutions that do it, and any sense that these are institutions that should continue into the future. Like this is an appalling abuse of the trust, of the public trust. And not only is it an abuse of men, but when you get right down to it, it turns women into chattel for the domestic violence and sexual assault profit industry. So they don't care about women.
Literally just maybe 100 or so years ago, 100 and such a few years ago, that women were still viewed as chattel.
Like literally viewed, no, seriously. That is projection. Women are viewed as chattel by the sexual assault and domestic violence profit industries. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. They're useful. Okay, let's finish the clip.
It's more like it doesn't work. Men, sort of qua men, inhabiting the role of victimized class doesn't work on people, I think. I think that there's a psychological response where both men and...
And it's actually, it's not just men and women. It's also men. It's mostly women. Like there was one researcher who I think, researched like the ability to talk about things that happen in your life. And she didn't do any research on men until a man came up to her and said, "You don't do research on men, do you?" And she said no. And he said, "That's very convenient." And he said,
Yeah.
my wife and my daughters would rather me die on my white horse than express my vulnerabilities, you know. And it's not men doing it, it's women. It's women putting this pressure on men. It's women doing it. It's women who want men who are strong. And until we address that, once again, the young men who are becoming more and more aware of this know that their vulnerabilities aren't a call for women to take responsibility and do something about them and protect them. Their vulnerabilities are a call to be regarded as sexually undesirable and put into the box of non-person. And they see this group of people who has utter contempt for their needs or recognizing their sacrifices gaining political power. Now, do you understand why they would want to oppose that? It's very simple. It's because of the ick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right. So before I read the Super Chow, I want to respond to this too and say that there is, I don't know if Louise Perry meant to do this, so I'm not going to like try to say this is what she meant or not meant. Can't read minds, but it is interesting that she said men as a victimized class does not work. And I want to just say that I don't think that any MRAs, not the ones that I know and talk to, have any interest in making men into a victim class, and they don't want to make women into a victim class either, because that creates a class struggle, which is not what we want. It's just about acknowledging when men individually are victimized by, you know, various issues, and recognizing that the majority of issues that feminists fight for presume women as a victim class. It's like the thing that you say about like, you know, you don't want to do the things that feminists do with women for men, right? It's not, we don't want to like call them a victimhood class. It doesn't work. Obviously, people don't feel the same kind of sympathy that it would be effective anyway, but you don't want to turn them into chattel. Exactly. And men wouldn't respond well to it. There's a number of reasons why, but when you have an individual man who has been falsely accused of something, lost his job, lost access to his kids, was, you know, got boned in a divorce, was circumcised and it ruined his life for whatever reason, or any other number of issues, and we point to those and say these are problems, especially things like circumcision, like literally does not have to exist. That's not making men into a victimhood class. This is a common thing that feminists do, and I think that it's still like there's like a, I don't know, like a miasma in over the whole conversation, where everyone presumes that MRAs are just trying to do feminism, and we're just not. We're just addressed, like trying to point out, here are areas where men are disadvantaged, or there are problems here that you call patriarchal that are just not gendered, and that we should be looking at these things in a way that takes the identities out of it and just do, you know, what is best for the child in whatever case that is, or for meritocracy or whatever. And they're thinking, oh, you're just trying to do the things that feminists do. No, it's not even possible to grift on men's rights. It's just not like that. That's the only, if you wanted to be a grifter, not that that's what this is about, but I'm just saying as an example, you would be subsidizing and supporting the cathedral. You'd be a feminist. Like you could make millions of dollars. So, and it wouldn't matter if you were saying anything true. So I just want to say that, and I'm not going to say that Louise Perry meant to do this, because I think this is very common, even for people who are non-feminists, you know, to say that MRAs are just, you know, they're trying to do the victimhood thing.
I don't think she did.
No. Let me go back a little bit so you can hear it. She did kind of say that.
Mostly, I kind of disagree with the domestic violence stuff, but in general, they're not wrong. It's more like it doesn't work. Men sort of qua men inhabiting the role of victimized class doesn't work on people.
Okay, no, that's not. So she's not saying that men are doing that. I think she's saying it just doesn't work. And honestly, what I'm getting from that, and I know it's easy to read into that because she does have a history of feminism, and feminists often say that. So I just wanted to be clear that I don't think that's what she's saying.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's saying it just doesn't work, and I think it's the same thing that you're saying. It just doesn't work.
Right.
And the reason is that there is something fundamentally wrong when we think society needs to protect and provide for men. There's just something fundamentally wrong with that concept. We just, on some level, we reject it as people. And yet, at some point, society does need to provide and protect men because they're the primary reason why society is continuing to exist. Or at least the utilities that we enjoy, the basic services that we enjoy, and the monetary system that we enjoy, and the taxes that fund all of the things that women say they need. But that idea, like, let's hold that in our mind for a moment. That idea that society should protect and provide for men is repulsive to the majority of people. And this, we can see this in statistics too. People do not like to take anything away from women to give it to men. They would prefer to see instrumental harm done to men if it benefits women. Almost never the reverse. Never. There's no evidence that there's anyone on this planet that would prefer to see harm done to women in order to benefit men. Okay, that just it's incompatible with most people's attitudes. And that's a statistical reality. Now you can talk about, everybody's part of some kind of social collusion and this is just socialized, or it's biological. Doesn't matter. This is what we're dealing with right now. Most likely we were dealing with it for most of human history. People do not see societies in terms of protecting and providing for men. They see men protecting and providing societies, and as an extension of that, women, children, and the elderly. That's how we see things. These are the fundamental gender roles. But this has a knock-on effect. Like, this is something we are denying with our narratives, but it is patently obvious. And young men are picking up on that. They realize it, I think. They realize that the narrative is that society benefits men at the expense of women, but the reality is the exact opposite. And they see the rise of this hypocrisy because there's nobody being honest. And I think that's why a lot of them are checking out. And
yeah.
I mean, you talk about repeal the 19th, but again, you see the rise of a group of people to whom your vulnerabilities are an ick. Like the political power, the increasing political power of a group of people who don't just regard your vulnerabilities as a point of indifference, but regard your vulnerabilities as a point of disgust. Like, that's a horrible attitude. Like, on just that level alone, if we just look at men and women as different political groups, on just a purely pragmatic political level, men need to oppose women's power. Like, you just look at it pragmatically. Women are incapable of regarding men's needs as something that they need to take responsibility for. Instead, they regard it as something that is a call to dehumanize men. And we hear it right here. And she's just being honest, right?
Yeah.
And that's good. She's being honest, like you were saying.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I'm saying. I think that's good. Okay, so I got a Super Chow. I should read it. Richard Bier gave us $5 and says, has anyone noticed that so many of these female content creators are feminist activists, and feminist activists often seem to not have grown past their high school level of immaturity? Well, I mean, I don't know if you're speaking about Louise Perry. I think that she's doing okay. But yeah, I mean, like, for the really rabid ones, for sure. Like, all right, shall we go to the next bit? Let me see. There's a little bit left in this. There's like 15 seconds.
I said, let's finish this part.
I think that there's a psychological response where both men and women generally respond to this with the ick. I think it's just, I don't know how you feel about that. I think that's a big part of the reason why people don't like men's rights activism, because that idea of men, it's basically emasculating, inhabiting that role. That's
the end of that clip, but do you want to hear her Cassie J's response?
I want to say this. So I'm glad that she's being completely honest. And the difference about her is that she is honest. Men's vulnerabilities give women the ick. And again, so you see a situation where the politically empowered half of the human race cannot recognize men's vulnerabilities and regards them as sexually undesirable for having them. Now, what's the response going to be from young men? What's the response to that? Like, you have to understand why young men are doing what they're doing. Like, from that alone. Okay, let's continue.
All right. So you want to hear Cassie J's response, or just go to the next time code?
Yeah, let's hear Cassie J's response.
The first time I heard that was actually from men's rights activists.
Interesting.
Where they said, this is not a position where you're going to be getting women interested in dating you, or, family members interested in, supporting you or rallying with you on the streets. They self-admittedly said, like, there's something primal in us that we want strong men.
Right,
we
yes.
don't want men to complain. We want men to be our protectors, and we want them to be your provider. And if they're having to sacrifice, even in sacrifice of their own health, to support their family, to support their community, look at all these occupations that are dangerous.
All right, I'm just pausing it there because I mean that's that's the general gist of her argument. And I mean, we know that this is an unpopular position. Like, and it's not just with women, but with men too. Like, they don't want, because they know, I think the reason why men have an ick response to this too is because they know that it will, if they say, yes, you have a point, this is all true, the women will view them differently by, like, osmosis, right? Like, remember we were on that Twitter conversation, we tried Twitter Spaces out, and we were talking about, like, men's issues, and there were these two guys, I don't remember their names, I think one of them was Sergio or something, and they were just basically saying, you just gotta man up, stop being a pussy, we gotta, like, I've read all of the social dynamics books, and I'm a master, and, like, all it was them saying, look, I don't want to, like, because I'm talking about family courts, I'm talking about child custody, I'm talking about false allegations, I'm talking about and the way that boys are raised, I'm talking about all these things that, like, manning up is not going to fix. Like, these are things that are happening to boys, to families, and these guys were so resistant. They wanted to fight me so hard. They wanted to shame me for bringing it up. And I know the reason is because they know that if they say, yes, this is all true, women will view them the same way that they view me. And I'm like, but the thing is, like, we have to talk about this as though it's true. And frankly, I don't fucking care what women think about me, because the women who matter to me, I know I only care about what they think, right? Like my mother, my wife, and you guys at HBR. So, random hoes on Twitter, I don't care if they say, oh, you're not a man. Like, you don't know me. But I think that men that have the same reaction, it is not just that they're afraid of being seen as vulnerable. It's I think they're genuinely afraid of how women will perceive them. And by the way, as an aside, she said, we don't want, like, women are not, like, really ready to hear, and men's rights activists know this, they've said this, that as a group, nobody wants to hear about men's problems. It makes us uncomfortable, and it makes men uncomfortable to talk about them. And this is why the toxic masculinity thing, where feminists say, oh, just open up about your feelings, like, it's literally saying self-destruct your relationship with women, because we're not going to ask women to listen, we're just going to ask you to, like, spill, right? And women are just going to do what comes natural to them and say, ugh, did you hear that guy expressing himself? Ugh, I wish he would just build a house or chop down a tree,
Yeah.
So, I mean, at least
men do that because they know that way of processing their emotions won't lead to them being a genetic dead end.
Exactly. And that's the thing, like, Feminists lie to men when they tell them express their feelings more. They lie because they know that women will not respond well. They don't. And so it's better that men find their own way.
Because then they don't have to take responsibility for how women.
Yeah, they can blame men for exactly.
Like, everything sort of lands on blame men. That's like,
yeah,
everything lands on blame men. Okay, let's listen to a bit more.
All right, you want to hear more of Cassie J or go to the next bit? The next time code.
Let's just keep going till we hit 25 minutes, and then we'll move to the next time code.
Dangerous. Right. You don't want your police officer complaining about, really anything. If they're there on a house call and ready to protect you, they.
Yeah, that would be funny if a cop showed up at your house and he's like, "Can I talk to you about the problems I'm having at home?"
You do have to bottle up their emotions.
That's sort of like, but yeah, that's it. That's right there. And what's really funny is all of these women, all of the ones who are bitching about the bear, all of the ones who are bitching about being political lesbians, they all have exactly the same attitude towards men. And I can see it because I think that I'm outside of it in a way.
Yeah.
And it is that instinctive maybe, or just inherent recognition that the buck stops with men. Like the buck stops with men. It's why lesbian separatists can yarp about, oh, we're going to create our own women-only commune. But when I say something like, well, your first step is to develop the trades necessary to run the utilities, and they're like, and then they just sort of flutter off.
Mm-hmm.
Not that, because they can't really imagine a world without men. They just can't.
I can.
All of this.
Mud huts.
Yeah. all of this noise and thunder coming from women comes from a position of never really, I don't even think they have the barest whisper of what life would be like without men. Like, men are their alpha and omega, and they demonstrate this with everything they say. Like, I got into this discussion or brief discussion with, I guess, a bunch of lesbian separatists who just sort of swanned on one of my threads, and they started flirting with each other. I think they think I'm a man or something. They started flirting with each other, and I said, do your relationships exist without an audience? And they don't. If there are no men around, there's no men to snub, and there's no point to anything that they do. Like, it is like they don't. It's astounding, because they literally regard men as God, but God is Satan. Like, it's like I can't get in that headspace, because I know men are just people. No offense, you're just people. Like,
I think men know that.
You can be very strong people. You can be very dedicated and disciplined people, but you are still people. It's admirable what men have accomplished, but they're still people. There's still limitations. There's still a point at which men are not capable of continuing. They're not capable of resolving. They're not capable of managing. And a lot of those points seem to come around where women's expectations, judgment, and attitudes towards them. Does that make sense? Like,
yep.
And men seem to be very vulnerable to that, and I can see that. I can see it. And to me, it seems to be that if women should have the right to, and the responsibility of political power, then they should earn it by recognizing their responsibility to the other half of the civilians in the state that they're part of. Recognizing their responsibility to men, recognizing their responsibility to the system, and living up to those responsibilities. That is how women earn the right to vote. And I don't see that happening. Instead, we have this vast narrative that continues to place men as the alpha and omega and puts women in a situation where they never have to take any responsibility, because they never really have any power. Like, and what the hell's the point of that life? Like, what's the point of a life with no responsibilities and no understanding of how your actions have an effect in the greater world? You might as well be locked in a foam box. Okay, let's keep going.
All right, let's keep going.
Emotions.
We'll
Look
rant
at
there.
soldiers in the army. From making the red pill, I do see that the way gender roles have split off, I do now believe is fundamentally grounded in just the way the cards fell biologically. It's women bearing children, breastfeeding, the postpartum toll it takes on your body, all these things, and then that we do need to protect. And there could be all this debate about, well, wars have always been started by men. Yes, but usually wars are to gain resources, and resources were to provide for families and to make things easier for their loved ones. So
yeah, and to protect your own women.
Okay,
I mean, men don't just decide, I want to invade this country for fun.
No,
Let's
they
go.
don't.
No, I know.
And it's actually proven that the vast majority of wars are started over resources, and resources are necessitated by population growth, which is which is driven by women.
Yeah.
Like even in cultures where they don't have birth control, women can still decide, or they still are able to somehow pace their births for whatever reason. Like that you can look at cultures like that don't have as much of a proliferation of birth control. They're still reducing in the number of children that they have, because there are ways for women to pace the births of their children to whatever rate that they desire. And they do so. They do so in North Korea, amazingly. Like, you'd think anywhere that women wouldn't be able to say no, it would be North Korea. And they're saying, no, Kim Jong, we're not doing what you say.
Even Kim Jong-un, the God Emperor of North Korea, couldn't keep his ducks in a row. His chattel.
He can't create.
Women were still viewed as chattel.
He can't even. North Korean dictator can't even create the handmaiden's tale. So it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous farce to even consider it as a hypothetical and to use it to prove or justify anything. But what I was getting at is wars are run or are waged over resources, and resources are something that are necessitated by the rate of reproduction, which is generally controlled by women. If it's not controlled by younger women, it's definitely controlled by older women in most societies. The babushka, the grandma, the matriarch effect is very much in place in a lot of more traditional societies. That's the other thing. Like you talk about a traditional society being patriarchy. Yep. It could as equally be called a matriarchy, because the matriarchs have so much more power and influence in traditional societies than they do in this one. They have what happens to older women? They just get shuffled off into old folks' homes or cruise lines. But again, wars are waged over resources. Resource pressure is a result of reproduction. So it's more like societies wage war. And the other thing that occurred to me, before we had wars, we had predators. And like other social mammals, human males tend to insert themselves between anything with teeth and claws and their social group. You see that with stallions, you see that with wolves. Like, if you have any kind of very social mammal, that's usually one of the tasks of the male half of that species. And so when humans were evolving, it's likely that men sort of did that as well. Okay, so they would protect their social groups in that way. And then war, I think, is parasitic on that attitude, if that makes sense. So men seeing danger and saying, I'm going to go towards the danger so it does not get to my social group. Men doing that. And then you can see that growing out of that. But the other thing is that it may be that humans wouldn't have gotten to this point without war. And what I mean by that is, as ugly as it is, we may be a species that preys on itself. So in order for one group of humans to survive, especially in a very, very, very resource-intensive hunter-gatherer lifestyle, like hunter-gatherers need 20, 30 times the land to sustain themselves as agrarian societies like our own. In that circumstance, it may be that humans need to prey on the resources of other humans even to survive. I know that may not make a lot of sense, but it's like when you have that when you are able to appropriate the resources of tribe B, if tribe A is able to appropriate the resources of tribe B, tribe A is able to survive. But if they didn't do that, neither tribe A nor tribe B would survive. They'd both starve to death. So it's almost like we need war to exist, at least to the point where we started to be able to make the land so productive that it almost becomes a moot point, right?
Yeah.
Which is also thanks to men. No offense.
Yeah. But I mean, I think we're good on war right now. I would like not more war.
Yes.
But it looks like we're getting more war. But yeah, like that'd be nice. There was a period about 4 years where there were no wars, or at least no new ones.
Okay.
It was cool for a while. No, we don't need it now. No.
Like now our wars are like luxury beliefs. We're just like, we don't really like those fuckers over there, so we're just going to annihilate them. That's like and usually it has to do with women's rights, you know? Have you noticed that? It's like, oh, those fuckers in the hills, they don't respect their women. Let's go murderize all of them, including their women.
That's right. And it works. You were like, oh shit. Are you telling me there's a woman somewhere that can't drive? Well, let's send some predator drones over there and show them what equality looks like.
Yeah.
Anyway,
they don't let their women drive, so we're just gonna behead their women.
Yeah. No chauffeurs for you, lady.
Only predator drones.
Yeah. You'll never see them coming. All right, let's play the rest of this.
Oh god,
it's been a lot of history in the making to lead to these gender roles that now we're trying, the last many decades, we're trying to deconstruct, well, how much is nature versus nurture of these roles. But yes, going back to what you said, men's rights activists were the first to admit to me that this is emasculating for us to be in this position. I would also add that activists in general, you're getting the most extreme of an ideology. If you're going to talk to, the feminist activists that really it's like their lifelong pursuit, you're getting a very specific type of personality.
Just pausing for the banana there. I don't know.
Boy.
Like,
What
no,
could she be talking about?
she's not. Yeah. Patriarchy, fuckface.
Well,
I mean, I think that's true though. I mean, I think that most people are normal, and even if I'm always right, people aren't ready to hear that. So yeah, it's fine. Okay.
And also something I've really become passionate about since making all of my films has been digging into trauma, because when it comes to gender politics and the activists that come out in support of these issues, it almost always, I've seen, starts with a personal trauma in their life. I have met some activists who did not have a personal trauma that led them to be an activist. For instance, Mark Angelucci, who was in the Red Pill and was meant.
R.I.P. to the king, Mark Angelucci. Actually, I don't have any personal trauma. Like, I wasn't circumcised. Thank you, Mom. And I haven't really been falsely accused of anything. I haven't had any of those things. But people around me, my friends, my very close friends who I've known for many years, they've had problems. I know of at least 4 dudes that got dragged through divorce, and they all got absolutely destroyed. And when it happened the first time, I was like, well, that's unfortunate. But the second time I was like, well, this is a pattern. But that's not why I got involved with this. I was just curious about like what the hell's going on between men and women. Like, I could see it around me, but I didn't really, I don't know. I haven't had any more negative experiences with women than any other dude. So anyway.
Yeah, let's keep
all right.
men's rights lawyer. He came to the men's rights movement because his best friend was being abused in a domestic violence situation, and so he wanted to use his law background to help men like his best friend. But
oh, real quick too, Mark Angelucci, I got to hang out with a couple of times. The guy's a fucking pimp. Okay, like he loved women, and he was like obviously a dude that got around. Like he was like, you know, I think, was he married? I think he was a bachelor.
Mm-hmm. I think he was a bachelor.
Yeah, he was a bachelor for sure. Italian guy, always dressed to the nines. Like the dude was a pimp, man. Like seriously, you know, I have to give him credit.
He was a nice man, though.
A very nice man, very charismatic. You know, yeah, he was a Chad. Is what I'm saying. He was a Chad. But anyway.
But for the vast majority of activists, they are coming from such a really deep emotional wound that happened in their past that led them to be the activists they are now. And also to be an activist, you have to be passionate. And so, you know, also, I remember, I think it was Gloria Steinem said something like, we have to keep women angry. And, you know, that I think that's with a lot of activist movements, it's like anger is the driving force for that movement, and you have to keep them angry.
Do you want to say anything to that? Because I want to say something.
I think that I think with men's issues, in my experience, like I'm angry at a lot of this stuff, and I think it's a justified anger, to be honest. Like the idea that men, instead of being recognized as more likely to be victims of sexual assault and domestic violence, they are as a group, as a gender, being blamed for it, infuriates me. And the idea that Mary Koss continues to schlep her creepy way through the institutions, rendering male victims of sexual assault invisible to the statistics, disgusts me. And the fact that there are tenured professors who can espouse horrific bullshit as long as it targets men repulses me. Like, it's like this stuff is unbelievably infuriating. And in particular, what really astounded me in the end of the day is the idea that women are being treated like victimhood chattel by the feminist movement is absolutely freaking infuriating. Like that the moment I realized that, it was just like, who does that?
Yeah.
Who says they advocate for a group of people and then turns around and ensures that they continue to experience the very thing that they say they advocate against? Like, who does that? How is it that feminists could ever justify questioning interventions that could reduce the rate of rape just because they weren't ideologically convenient? I mean, think about that. Can you think about this discussion? Well, you know, we could stop women from being raped, or we could reduce the rate of rape, but it's not ideologically convenient. So why would we do that? And then to be seen as the people who speak for any victims of rape, that's freaking astounding. And yeah, it infuriates the hell out of me. And I think that it should, rather than, you know, keep them angry, I think people should get angry at that. Everybody should be angry at that. There isn't somebody who's experienced rape or attempted rape or any kind of sexual assault who shouldn't be infuriated by the fact that the entire dialogue around it is controlled by people who do not give a crap about your pain except as a political talking point. That should piss people off. So yeah, keep them angry. Get people angry. But on the other hand, what I've noticed is that as a result of our work, there are men who are less angry. It's not us that's making men angry. It's us that is allowing men a space, in many cases, to move past the anger and process the anger and because the thing is that even the guys who say, yeah, I understand why women would choose the bear, those guys are saying that because they're prioritizing a particular way of viewing themselves, an identity, over recognizing being harmed by women, because that is an abusive statement to make. It's an abusive, dehumanizing statement to make. And a man who agrees with it is prioritizing a particular identity, a particular way of seeing himself over recognizing the harms being done to him. But that kind of guy internalizes those harms, never does not acknowledge them on a conscious level, but they continue to exist on a subconscious level. And the instant a woman doesn't support his self-identity, oh boy, is she in for a world of hurt. All of that subconscious suppressed harm vomits forth like a goddamn volcano of fury. Believe me, I prefer men who are processing their anger consciously to men who say things like, oh, of course I understand why she chooses the bear. Ugh.
Yeah.
And I've seen that play out.
I will say, though, I think Cassie is being really charitable, and I think that's fair.
Yeah, fair.
To feminists, because I think there is a difference here, right? I think it's true that most people who get involved with men's rights activism and feminism are doing so because of some experience they had. Obviously, there's a lot of men that have, again, they have experienced like the system, and there are women too. I remember Jordan Peterson was talking with somebody was interviewing. He talked about his conversation with Naomi Wolf. And Naomi Wolf was like a really hardcore, dyed-in-the-wool feminist. I don't want to say radical because she was standard. People would call that radical today, but it's just standard feminism. And I remember her getting into an argument with Karen about rape culture and stuff. And Peterson was saying that he was commenting on the fact that when he learned about her own history of sexual assault that she had experienced, he said that he understood why she was a feminist, why she was an angry feminist. And I think about that. I think that it's probably true that there are a lot of women who have had negative experiences, and that brings them to feminism because they think that it is the answer or like a path to a solution. But with that in mind, I think the important difference seems to be is that I don't think men's rights activists are trying to convince people who come over to men's rights activism that the problem is women. I think that they're trying to deal with the legal system, the courts, and maybe some of the laws on things like male genital mutilation. And feminism becomes an obstacle to that, so they have to oppose it. But I think mostly it's an attack on the ideology and not the people. Whereas the women who have trauma that become feminists, they're conditioned to believe that men are the problem. And so I think that there is anger, but where the anger is directed on both sides of this thing is very different. I don't know if I'm being, does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm gonna, because you often say it's women. So in some ways we are identifying women as a problem. But here's what I'm gonna say to that. Nobody, as far as I know, on the men's issues advocacy or men's rights activist side says that women are, or very few people say that women are 99% of the rapists, 90% of the men, of the people engaging in domestic violence. They're saying that women are probably 50% of both, or around 50% of both. They're not saying that. And I think that there's some people who say that society oppresses men, but at least I don't. I'm not going to answer to that because I don't think that oppression is a reasonable narrative to use when you talk about the dynamic between men and women. Yes. And a lot of men's rights activists just want the laws changed or the problems recognized. And I personally want the lie, which is what really pisses me off, is the lies. I want the lies exposed. Men don't oppress women. Full stop. End of story. They don't. And any institution that requires that power narrative to exist, well, you need to crumble and not exist anymore, because it's a horrible, disgusting, despicable lie about men and about women. And I don't think, I'm not going to replace that lie with women oppress men, because I don't think it's true. However, I will say, when we say women, we got to look at women's contribution. Well, what happens when you only blame one side for how many generations now? and you do not look at the contribution of the other side in the dynamic. Like, we have blamed men for literally everything. They can't possibly be built to blame for everything. It is not possible for women to have evolved with absolutely no effective way to maintain homeostasis in the environment. Like, every animal on this planet has been given some tool to provide for itself. Birds have wings and beaks. Bats have sonar. Tigers have claws. Wolves have endurance. Dolphins can do what they do, echolocate, whatever they do. Dolphins can dolphin. But women have nothing? All they have is to be one half of a species, and the other half
They are the rib.
despises them and is their enemy? Like, what? Like, that doesn't even make sense. There isn't an animal that evolves that doesn't have the ability to provide some for itself somehow. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Like, maybe it latches on to another animal, but it's able to have the ability to do that. Right? It has the mechanism to manipulate the other animal into not noticing it or to giving it its resources. There's no animal on Earth that doesn't have the ability to maintain itself. And to say that human women are in one half of a species and the other half is their natural predator is the most... This statement should shut people's brains on how retarded it is. Like, this stuff shouldn't even be argued. It should be people should look at the people espousing it and say, are you retarded? Like what is it this statement doesn't make enough sense for it to be a statement. And yet here we are pretending this stuff isn't gibberish. Okay.
Never go full retard.
All right, let's play some more.
Yeah, let's get through this.
That's the emotion that gets, that's the squeaky wheel that gets the funding. So,
The squeaky
so I
wheel gets the
understand
funding.
The feeling of ick. I think, you just gotta, it's good to recognize that feeling. And I think that men's rights activists can, not all of them, I mean, some are less self-aware, but I do think a lot of them know that it's, it's not popular to be in that kind of position. I think that just adds to my compassion for them, though, is that as women, we are really encouraged to share our feelings, and it's almost a way to bond with other women. It's also a way to gain sympathy or even services from men.
And set the social agenda as well. That's a big thing.
Yeah, for sure.
I think there's even a science behind, like, tears garnering sympathy and like the actual substance. So yeah, women really kind of have that to our advantage that we're able to share our emotions and have people respond with wanting to help. And men don't really have that same privilege.
All right, that was the end of that clip.
Okay.
So the next
much to say.
Yeah, I mean, she's right. I mean, there's not much to say. So 22 minutes. Oh no, I already read that. 26:16.
Yep.
Is the next one. So we'll go to, like, right here.
You see it everywhere. The bits where I think the men's rights activists have make a good point. They are right. Basically, they are completely right in that there is a very stupid version of feminism, which is really quite popular. So the version...
No, that's just feminism. It's not a stupid version of it.
Okay.
It's just the stock version. It's the vanilla feminism, not the expansion pack, not the 3rd edition, not with all the DLC, not with all of the the season passes. This is just vanilla. Not champion edition feminism, not super turbo feminism. It's just vanilla. But go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, once you start with the premise that men oppress women, you're out right out of the starting gate. You're wrong, and also viciously wrong. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I get that she's trying. This is the thing that, like, is very frustrating, but it's I'm so used to it. Like, no matter how moderate or or even like outright like non-feminist or anti-feminist people claim to be, there is this thing that can't let go of it. Like, oh, I just a little bit of, can I have a little bit of feminism? Can I just get like a sprinkling? It's like, dude, you don't need it. Like, men have no interest in taking away your rights. They love you. They will die for you. They do it every day, you know, but you're still like worried that if you give it up, that somehow men will be like, aha, I got you. And then the shackles will appear, you know, like at the end of Aladdin, like phenomenal cosmic powers and everything that comes with it. But anyway,
of feminism that says that like women are disadvantaged always and everywhere, that the cause of this is this kind of vague, I don't know, patriarchy like society, this almost this kind of dark matter that you can't see, you can't touch, but it's there, and it's making women's lives worse in lots of ways, and that this is clearly not true always and everywhere, and things like, yes, the fact that men die more in workplace accidents than women do, that men do more dangerous and difficult jobs than women do, you know, all of that stuff is true. I guess where I diverge,
I'm pausing there for the banana because it's getting a little bit long, but at least, yeah, I don't know what she's gonna say. I can't remember. I did watch this, but
and the thing is that this is a choice, sure, but there's actually a tremendous amount of social pressure for men to the very least provide for themselves that doesn't exist in the same way for women. And then the other thing is that men take these jobs and they take them because they have a higher risk tolerance, they have a higher tolerance for personal discomfort, they have greater strength so they can manage the demands of the work. So it is actually a situation, and also they're willing to do it. So they will be incentivized using money to do it. Women aren't incentivized to do these jobs. The only way that women would end up a majority in these jobs is if they were forced to by gunpoint, or starvation or desperation. So even if it's voluntary, men are voluntarily doing these jobs that women don't want.
yes.
And there's no recognition for that. Okay, let's hear what she has to say.
All right.
is on the idea that this is like that it's all about score settling. It seems as if in some ways men's rights activism ends up just being the mirror of the stupid kind of feminism. Where it's just like it's just like a tally of no, here's the way in which your sex sucks and my sex is great, you know, like in its worst iteration.
Wait, who's saying this? Because I don't. Oh, Allison dropped. Allison, what the fuck? Oh, now I'm gonna get foul language. All right. Just waiting to see if Allison comes back. But yeah, I don't know if she's like saying that MRAs are doing that or what, but it's the thing is that Louise Perry maybe doesn't see is that feminism has control over the conversation about gender, period. Like Allison is messaging me. I'm dealing with some sort of storm. Oh no. Let me just let me see how long. Okay, I messaged her. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, like the thing is, we live in a feminist society. Like if you ask the average person like what they, you know, believe about the world, they will, I mean, even if they say I'm not a feminist, it doesn't matter. But if you ask them like the basic principles of feminism, they're just going to agree with it. Like, do you believe that men have it better than women? Do you believe that, you know, we live under a system that is unfair to women? Do you believe that women get paid less than men? You know, things like that. They're just going to say, yeah, sure, right? This is normal. So in order for us to have our say, we have to kind of like try to demystify people, you know, and say, look, man, I'm trying to help you see that these things that you think about the world are not true. And we can't even start talking about, like, you know, what men need, what boys need. We can't even start to have that conversation if people are still under this you know, this fog of lies about the relationship between men and women. Okay, Allison's coming back.
Okay.
Are you back?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Let me just
There's
it's okay. What's going on?
a hailstorm, but it's really strange because it's like it looks like a clear sky in one area, but then on the other it's raining. So it's a very odd storm. But yeah, I think I am
Okay.
actually I am actually on Starlink, so I think maybe that might have been it part of the problem.
You weren't before? Oh, you are right now, or you were before?
I have been on Starlink this entire time. Like the entire time that we've been doing podcasting for the last year, I've been on Starlink. But sometimes like weather will cause an issue. So
all right. Well, Elon, get on that. Get that right. Okay.
Let's do this.
So anyway, what she was talking about, how I don't know if you heard the last bit. Should I go back? Because you dropped.
Just give me a summary. Oh.
She was basically doing the whole, like, it's the mirror of feminism thing. But here, I'll play the last 15 seconds.
As if in some ways men's rights activism ends up just being the mirror of the stupid kind of feminism.
Oh, not even just feminism,
just like
but the stupid kind of feminism.
Like not just like vanilla feminism, but like this weird, you know, like it's like the you know, when video games are allowed to roll, it's like the Dark Souls 2 feminism, which is like the least popular version, right? But no, I mean, obviously this is what I was saying before. There is this instinct in people, no matter how non-feminist they claim to be, that they just can't let go. They can't let go of like any form, because there is this in the back of their mind, especially women, they're in the back of their mind. There's this like, man, but if I give it all up, I'm gonna be reduced to chattel. It's gonna, like, the men are gonna say, aha, we gotcha, you know, gotcha, bitch. And then they're gonna like chain them to the stove and turn them into baby farms.
Well,
and it's just not true. Yeah, it's
okay.
Yeah, not the good feminism, the bad feminism. That a reflection of the bad feminism, not the good
feminism. Now, is it the trans exclusionary radical feminism? Is the trans activism feminism that's bad? Like, what part of feminism is bad, and why wasn't it bad when it originally asserted that men oppress women? I wonder damn evidence.
I wonder if Cassie's, like, her expression looks like, oh, you poor dear.
Let's hear what she has to say.
Okay. I don't think Cassie fights with her too much, but
like a tally of no, here's the way in which your sex sucks and my sex is great, you know, like in its worst iteration. Whereas I guess my position now over time is more that men, and, you know, as you were saying, that this stuff is all downstream of biology and it's been honed over millennia, and that men and women have complementary roles. And that we need each other, and that sometimes, you know, sometimes our natural differences are in tension with one another, and sometimes
okay, but when men need you get the ick. Like, we need each other, but when men need me, I get the ick. Like, I'm being less charitable now because that really irritated me. So the problem with, like, again, I don't advance the notion that women oppress men, because I think it's a dynamic between men and women. It's a way that we've structured our identities. And I don't think that women are responsible for 90% of domestic violence and 99% of rape. I think it's much more equal. So I don't see how I am a mirror image of feminists. And certainly, like I don't have the same ideological opinions as trans radical feminists, or a trans activist feminist, or trans radical, like a trans exclusive radical feminist. Yeah, I don't. Yeah. Like, okay, so which insanity are you referring to, Lori? Like, which one at this point? Like, which is the stupid feminism? Because it all seems pretty stupid to me. Because it started, like, it literally, feminism started this whole, well, men and women are on two sides, and we need you to choose our side.
Like, why are there two sides? Like, she's saying, well, I don't something to the tune of
that is what she's afraid of. That is the hypothetical she's worried that men's rights are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you just look at men's rights, let's not just look at the manosphere, which is all just, let's face it, it's men who, I would say that men's rights activists tend to be like a little bit more self-reflective in many cases and aware and more aware of the dynamics between men and women. But when you look at groups of men who are just sort of reacting to the situation as it is, yeah, maybe she's right. Like, it's more like they're more about, well, women suck, and you know, they're stupid and they're immoral, and I mean, it's really hard not to come to that conclusion by what many women put out on TikTok and Manifestel. Like, but on the other hand, you know, they aren't really, like, those guys aren't men's rights activists, and they would probably say we give them the ick too. In fact, you could really make the line between people who get the ick when when they're presented with men's issues, and people who may get the ick but don't let that drive their opinion, or they prefer to recognize the truth rather than being driven by the ick, which is really, that's the thing. There are the people who are driven by the ick when it comes to men's issues, and there are people who are not driven by the ick when it comes to men's issues. And that's the real demarcation. Because you can see there are many conservatives that are driven by the ick, or traditionalists, or whatever you want to call them. They are driven by the ick when it comes to men's issues. Feminists are driven by the ick when it comes to men's issues. Normie women are driven by the ick. Manifestel is driven by the ick. Trans radical feminists are likely driven by the ick. So that's the real political divide. Are you driven by the ick? And you overcome it and actually recognize solutions based on what is happening in reality. And so I don't know, I disavow this idea that there isn't a stupid feminism. All feminism is driven by the ick. Most of political positions today are driven by the ick.
Well, yeah, I mean, all feminism is stupid. There is no branch, the whole tree. But
I mean, all feminism is based on this idea that men oppress women.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, when she says there's a special branch of feminism that believes patriarchy, it's like, no, that's the whole thing. That's the baseline. That's like step one, you know? Like, okay, but anyway, it's the rule zero of feminism.
All feminism
patriarchy
demands that we take a side in the supposed war between men and women, which supposes a side and it supposes a war. Like, all right,
let's keep going.
Yeah, I wonder how you feel about men's rights. I mean, eight years on, you know, how's your view evolved?
Great.
I hear that. I think that was probably what I said in many of my video diaries while making the red pill was, I feel like what they're critiquing feminism over, aren't they just doing the same thing and reversing the sex? When I would bring up that argument to them, they would say, yes, well, we're just trying to be the counter position to add balance to the conversation. And where I kind of landed, even now, so many years later, I would rather like to walk my life being the balance rather than trying to be the counterbalance to something, just to live your life like the world that you want to live in. Isn't that some good quote? Like, what is that quote? I can't remember. But just be the person or you want to see in the world, or something like that.
Okay. The quote.
Be the change you want to see in the world.
Actually, it could be what I said at Calgary Expo, which is, build what you want to see. Yeah. Build what you want to see. And
I mean, I think that. Oh, go ahead. Go first.
Well, she doesn't have to fight the fight, right? But that's the other thing. Like, I don't think that men's rights or men's issues advocacy, well, it is the counterbalance in that it is the counter argument to feminist power narrative. Like recognizing the harms done to men is the counter argument to men oppress women. Because
Right.
if men are in positions of authority and the situation for men is not better than the situation for women, then men in positions of authority does not equal women oppressed. So that is the counter argument. It's not even the counterbalance, it's the counter argument. So when men's rights activism and feminism interact, neutralized, like feminism is neutralized and removed. And then we can start talking about reality, right? We can start talking about the existence of harms to men that need to be addressed. And we can start talking about all this other stuff that needs to be addressed. And we can also start talking about harms to women in a way that will actually start reducing them. Because we have all of the information about the problem. And you cannot create a solution without all of the information, with only half the information. It's impossible. Right. So I would say that men's issues advocacy, not even men's issues, men's rights activism is the counter argument to feminism, not the counterbalance, the counter argument. The counterbalance to feminism is Andrew Tate. The counterbalance, and honestly, people are like, and yes, I've said his name. I have invoked the name of our Satan. But and I'm currently in another argument with him, with people who want me to take responsibility for him by disavowing him. And I keep telling them, right? 10 years ago, I looked at what feminists did to the masculine norms index, and I noticed that there was a certain type of man who was the only man who could within that context credibly say that he was differentiated from women. There was a certain type of man, and that type of man, the feminists say, this type of man is the only type of man that is different from women, right? This is the only set of norms that makes men different than women. And I looked at that and I said, this is what feminists are advocating as the only way for men to differentiate themselves from women. This is the type of man that is going to produce. Guess who I described 10 years ago?
Yeah, we know.
Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
Okay. 10 years ago, I looked at the feminist masculine norms index and how they had reduced it down to a particular set and what kind of man that described. And I said, feminists are telling men, this is the only way you differentiate yourself from women. What do you think men did? They did what feminists told them because they want to have at least some way of saying, this is how I'm different from women. This is what my identity is based on as a man. That came out of feminism. Andrew Tate was given, Andrew Dworkin gave birth to Andrew Tate. And I am not going to, that is how I disavow him, by saying that's where he came from. He came straight out of that. Just imagine her squatting down, giving birth to him. That's what happened. Yes, disgusting, isn't it?
I'd rather not. Although I would say that it was either men had two choices. They either going to be more like Tate, or they were going to transition and live as women. So like it was like those were your choices.
This is all. So these are Andrew Dworkin's deformed twins that she gave birth to. Andrew Tate and the radical trans rights movement.
Yep.
There you go. That's where it came from. And then the media picks up this deformed Andrea Dworkin abortion and dances him around on the podium they construct for him. And then these individuals look at him and say, well, that's who's speaking for men's issues. And they look at me and they say, are you going to take responsibility for that? For telling people that this is the result?
No, of course not. Let's move on because I want to say something about what Cassie is saying about the
I went a little bit crazy there.
No, it's okay. I'm going to try and be brief. I think that what she is saying proves why we are necessary, because if Cassie J had not made the Red Pill documentary, she would not have found herself being more fair to men and their issues, and her husband and her son by extension, because she was a radical feminist before she made the movie. So when she says, I'd rather live the balance, it's only because of the content that we create and the conversations we are having that was possible. And what I think the goal for me is to use this advocacy, this work that we do to help people who only see one side, see the other side, and they will be able to live a whole and more complete life and see the world in a fuller way. So like, I'm happy to be on this side of the conversation if it brings people to some clear understanding. I don't even want to say like centrist, because again, that's that whole like, let me just hold on to a little bit of feminism. Can I have a little bit of feminism? No, you don't need it. Like, you can love women without it. I know it sounds crazy, but you can do it. I believe in you. And so like, I don't take it personal that she says that, because she's demonstrating that I'm right, again, because I'm always right. So all right, so I got a couple super chows, a big one too. So let me put those on the screen. And this is from Richard Bier for $5, and he says, a thing about men checking out is that if it results in any noticeable infrastructure deterioration, at that point it will be too late. After all, you don't want to be raising your army to fend off the White Walkers only when they are seen approaching your castle, but too many people are too preoccupied with getting over on the neighboring kingdom to worry about the marching horde. Something about women supposedly being incapable of their own survival reminds me of an experiment where capuchin monkeys were taught how to use a vending machine and were given tokens for performing tasks. Can you guess what the female monkeys did to obtain more tokens than what they could get from performing tasks? Apparently, they very quickly learn how to create the prostitution industry. Thank you for that. And then I got another one from Richard Bier, and he gives us $5 and says, the notion of men oppressing women being false. Lauren Southern Discomfort agrees with it being false. This is a cash cow that will be milked until said cow will appear to be either anorexic or emaciated, as the Australian man who she was married to is a representation of all men everywhere. All right. And did I get anything else? Let me just make sure there's no Rumble rants. I did get a Rumble rant. So NovaFan21 gave us $1 and said, notice how even after seeing a documentary that shows real men's rights activists, they still make it all about Andrew Tate and any other male figure they hate instead of the honey badgers. Well,
but we have to answer to that. Like, we have to answer to the fact that feminism constructed Andrew Tate. The media took him, turned him into their dancing monkey. In no way do we have any control over this process. All we can do is be the actual alternative that would have prevented him in the first place. Like, that's it. That's all we can be. Like, and the only way that I can think to disavow him is to say, well, that is the result of feminism. They constructed the whole narrative that men only could differentiate themselves from being women by becoming Andrew Tate or women, or become a woman. They constructed this whole dichotomy, and then the media put him on display and blamed men for him. Well, that's a response. That's men's response to overwhelmingly being told that their only way of being men is that. Like, where are they gonna, where even feminism puts blame on media for telling men that, right? Like, where else are they gonna get it? It just doesn't want to recognize its own culpability in this whole thing. But anyway, let's finish this off, because it's getting a little
long in the tooth.
Long in the tooth, yeah.
Maybe that was all I disagreed with that one. Yeah.
Do you, so what, I mean, what, because one feminist view, and it's also a view that is shared by some men's rights activists, is that gender roles per se are bad, right? That it's wrong to treat, it's wrong that we have disparate outcomes between the sexes in any given field. We should be seeing absolute equality everywhere. You know, the differences between the sexes are so trivial that we shouldn't have gender roles. People should just kind of choose their own adventure. I don't agree with that.
I also don't.
All right, I'm pausing it there. I mean, he only put it like the time code is up till 39:59. So it was just Louise Perry's comments.
I wonder if
you want to hear Cassie's response?
sure, yeah. Well,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't agree with it. I think, the political correctness that we're very well aware of limits a lot of conversations about, so for instance, after I had my first son, who's now 3, I have a second son who's 7 months old, it really gave me a new way to look at how, as a pregnant woman and then a mother to young children, I cannot perform in work like I could before I had children, or even before I was pregnant.
They're both mothers. I think Louise Perry, I know she's
thank
pregnant.
God for you as a human female, that you have another part of the human race that's willing to pick up the slack. Like,
yeah. Well, well, I'm gonna let Cassie finish, but
yeah.
I think it's funny that people talk about like gender roles as though, and then what they say is, I reject gender roles. I think people should be able to do whatever they want. But that's kind of like the I believe in equality of opportunity argument, because when you leave people alone to do whatever they want, if they fall into gender roles anyway, because we're probably going to in like 90% of cases, then you don't get to complain that people are like being constricted, because we're literally letting people choose your life, right? How do you want to live? And then if women say, well, I guess I'll make babies because, it's a gender role, it's a social construct. I guess I'll be a mom. I guess I'll stay home. And the men are like, I guess I'll work and I guess I'll support the family. Like, if that is how it shakes out in the majority of cases, when it is allowed, then what are you complaining about? Like and I'm not saying that Louise Perry is complaining, but it's like, no, I've never heard any men's rights activists saying that we need to like get rid of gender roles. And I also never heard them saying that we need to enforce them. I've only ever said them say, look, we think fathers should be involved with their kids. We think that Title IX is being used as a weapon against men. We think that boys' penises should remain intact. These are not gender role things. Like, that's all feminist shit. And it's like, when feminists say we want women to be free from their gender roles, they don't really mean it. That's what I'm saying. It's like the equality of opportunity argument, where people say, I believe in equality of opportunity. And I say, okay, then you'll just leave people alone to do whatever they want. But then they'll say, but we don't have it right now. And it's like, why? Well, because look, the outcomes are not equal. Well, but that's what yeah.
Equality of opportunity doesn't mean equal outcomes.
No, it doesn't. But they measure the success of equality of opportunity by looking at outcomes. It's like saying I measure the success of my advocacy to remove gender roles by looking at how gender roles have shaken out. And when they shake out in general, with men doing the thing that they've always done and women doing the thing that they've always done, then they say there's a problem. There's too many gender roles being enforced. And it's like, no, it's just, this is how people are going to do it. And even in cases when it's like asymmetrical or not quite right, like where the man and the woman both work, or maybe the man stays home or works from home, like that's going to be an outlier. You have to be okay with it. But it doesn't mean that, oh, look at them rebelling against the system. Like, no, they've just chosen to live like under, like within their means, and they've made some special exceptions.
Okay. This is like, again, you don't have to have a prescriptive belief about how people are to arrange their lives to think that men should still be in their children's life after divorce.
Right.
Like this is unnecessary. It's that I'm against gender roles. It's just that I don't think that it's really, I don't think we need to prescribe them. And maybe that makes me a liberal of some kind. Like, but and the honest to God truth is, even if you look at the Bible, the biblical notion of marriage, there's a heck of a lot of ways like that things that can be accommodated. If you look at the prescriptions of a good wife is supposed to be industrious. A good wife is supposed to manage her finances in such a way that it benefits her family. There's all kinds of things that are totally compatible with a quote unquote career, even though most people don't have one, but a job for a wife. You know, it's totally compatible with an external life for a wife. You know, and so it's even probably maybe compatible for a wife who brings in most of the money, and the husband does something else or does the farm or whatever. You know, the Bible is surprisingly flexible in its gender roles if you actually read it.
Sure. Yeah.
The only thing that I would say is that I think the big gender role that feminists complain about isn't that. It's the whole idea that women submit to men. And I'm going to say that I think that's accurate. However, I don't think I think Pearl, for example, doesn't understand that statement. And I think people,
Yeah.
I'm going to give my interpretation of that statement. That is, women have something to learn from men when it comes to the kind of virtues and expectations that are necessary for keeping a system alive and healthy. Okay, so women have things they can learn from men and the way that men conduct themselves in the world. So it's that a woman needs to learn from these things from her husband. She needs to learn to be able to take responsibility for how she behaves. She needs to learn to see her actions in terms of their long-term consequences. Oh goodness, what the heck happened?
Oh, my microphone fell.
Okay.
Sorry, I need like a arm or something because it's like on a tripod. See, it's like on a tripod and it's like.
That is a very snazzy tripod. I like the graphic.
I made that. I had this made. Yeah, see.
It's very snazzy.
Anyway.
Okay.
So sorry about that.
It's microphone drip. I think is that right?
It's got some drip.
Yeah.
A little bit of drip. Okay.
So, but ultimately it's the submission as opposed to obey, because it was servants and children that need to obey. Women need to submit. I think submission has the aspect of learn to it. Recognize you have something to learn from men. Like, humble yourself, for God's sake, ladies. Half the human race,
we are sorely lacking in humility in this modern age.
The human race could have something to say about living in this world that you don't know. And I think that's what it really means. It means being willing to learn from men. And that is actually more challenging because, you know, a lot of traditionalists or so-called traditionalists can't really explain what submission means in this context. And they just turn it into, well, a woman needs to submit to a man benefiting her, which is, well, okay, so I submit to winning the lottery? Thank you. I'm going to submit to getting $1 million. I'm going to submit to a man throwing his cape over the puddle. Like, what is that? What kind of submission is that? Anyway, sorry, I'm poking a little fun at what I consider to be sort of faux traditionalists, shall we say. Mm-hmm. But okay, are we done with? I think we're done. Okay,
that's it. Yeah, I think we got it. I mean, I'll read this one bit that the supporter said. He said that Cassie's response, while she doesn't want to discriminate against young women with children by implying that they are unfit as employees, she does admit that when she had 2 female employees herself, she wouldn't be able to send one of them off for maternity leave because she was operating on a low budget. And this is kind of like the reality is, right? Mm-hmm. Like, when women have kids, it affects their employment, it affects the companies that they work for, and it would infect their employers. And she was just admitting to this reality. So, no, I mean, and yeah, it's true. Like, it is what it is. True. So nothing we can do about that.
Do you want to do the chaser?
Let's do the chaser. It's a good idea. So I'm going to share this instead. Okay. So this is Based Camp. And they made a video about the bear meme, man or bear in the woods. And the man, I don't remember their names, I'm sorry, but the gentleman on the left was trying to convince his wife on the right that, this is extremely troubling because what it says about like the trust between men and women. And she is not quite getting it. So we're going to go to here. I think this is where she starts to get it.
I think you always, and a lot of people do this. They're like, Malcolm, you go too hard against the monoculture and stuff like that, because they assume that the monoculture is their perception of the monoculture when they've been associated with it. Okay. Not they don't know how brainwashed and culty some individuals have gotten. But what I would say is the first thing to understand what we're really learning from this.
So he's trying to get her to see why the bear meme is like troubling. Okay, she's not getting it. This is what, well, yeah, he makes the argument for it, and I think this is where she starts to figure it out.
Is I'm going to play a clip of somebody interviewing a bunch of women, but first I'm going to slightly change the question that's being asked.
Okay.
Would you prefer to be in the woods with a bear or a random black man? It's black.
Man is scary. With a bear.
Well, I've heard about bears. They don't always attack you, right? So maybe a bear.
Probably a bear.
But men don't always attack.
100% a bear, which is like terrifying to say, but
Definitely a bear.
some
Black.
men are very scary out there. A bear.
Even some men are saying bear, although we could predict that this man's opinion will be whatever makes women approve of him.
If I were alone in the woods.
That's hoe math, but you know, pretty funny.
True.
Great. It's a great channel if you guys would. Yeah, he wants women to approve of him for sure.
Would you rather me encounter a bear or a
Black.
man?
I feel more like bear. I don't know, because I feel like I would know what the outcome would be with a bear.
And I think when you hear this, now you get really uncomfortable. When you hear the way people are responding to the initial question, but I have changed the context slightly, you get really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Or
this is what Goodfella did in his video, where he was like, he said the best way to respond to the bear meme is to say, "Oh, so you find black men scary," but I agree it works to make people like, "Oh shit, what am I saying?" But it really pisses me off that it's even necessary, because what it does is it conceals the real problem.
Well, it's a reflection of the ick, right?
Yeah.
We have an ick when we perceive men to be a vulnerable group. What's happening here is there's at least some discourse around black men being a vulnerable group, or that that racism makes it so that we shouldn't offend or demonize black men. So we don't have necessarily the ick in recognizing that maybe we should consider men's feelings, black men's feelings, when we talk about them as being more dangerous than a wild animal that used to prey on humans. Okay, so we see that, we go like, oh shit, maybe we should consider black men's feelings. But we don't consider men's feelings, because that would give us the ick. To recognize that men's feelings get hurt gives us the ick. So if you look at the bear meme in the context of the ick and how the ick affects people's attitudes, we don't recognize that the bear meme is actually demonization of men, because we don't recognize that men have feelings. Because if we did recognize that men have feelings that should be respected, or that could be hurt, or that they are vulnerable, that would give us the ick. So the ick is protecting us. So it's really ironic that women talk about these things in the way they do, because what those women are demonstrating is that they have disgust for men's vulnerabilities. They can't even see men's vulnerabilities in this. When somebody comes up to them and says, "Hey, what do you think? Would you rather punch a man in the face or a bear?" And they say, "Well, I'd rather punch a bear in the face." Or no, so I would rather punch a man in the face. It's the same thing, right? It's that they just don't care, or they cannot see the vulnerability of the men to them. That wasn't a very good analogy. I apologize. Let me think if I can think of a better one. They just don't, like, when somebody comes up to you and says, do you think black men are dangerous? People are like going to stop and say, well, should I respond in a way that could be offensive to black men? Because they recognize that they should be concerned about black men's feelings. But when you go up to someone and say, do you think men are dangerous, more dangerous than a bear? They don't, because they don't perceive that they should care about men's feelings.
Right.
And those women didn't pause and say, hey, I'm about to say something really cruel. Should I do that? And then they'll justify it by saying, oh, but men are so dangerous. But they're not. They're not actually more dangerous than bears. And furthermore, black men are more dangerous statistically than white men. And we can get into the reasons why that's the case, but statistically, it's true, right?
Yeah.
Like black men, and ironically, one of these feminists threw some BGS statistics, and I found out that for contact sexual crimes that don't involve minors, Native American men are the most dangerous, like disproportionately, hugely disproportionately responsible for sexual violence. Now, having said that, I don't trust the BGS statistics, but if we're just going to go on criminal statistics, Black men and Native American men are more dangerous than white men. And yet, when you go up to those women and say, would you choose a Black man or a bear? They would stop and they would say, oh wait, I have to consider Black men's feelings.
What's the approved response to this? Not what's the truth, what is my gut? It's like what would be the thing that they want to hear?
Or even potentially, I recognize Black men's vulnerabilities because of racism. Therefore, I can model in my mind the idea that I need to not hurt this person. But that isn't the case with men.
Right,
Is that's that right. Women are using their control over men's identities, their power over men's identities with this man and bear question. So what that question does, it shows the women who are sociopaths. And I remember, like, a while back, or actually only a few days, so it's not even an I remember situation. It's because, but one of the sexual assault centers in my province did shit with the man versus bear. And they're supposed to serve the public in terms of sexual assault services. So they have a responsibility to the public. And they were presenting this crap. And of course, they presented it in such a way, it's such a mealy-mouthed way and lots of corpo speak. But at the same time and I tweeted at them and I said, what do you think this said? What is your engagement with this man versus bear question say to male victims of sexual assault that you should be serving? What does it say to them? And it's unbelievable. It's unbelievably sickening that even a service funded by the government for survivors of sexual assault would present this to men and boys who could themselves be survivors of sexual assault, that they would present this attitude, this behavior. It's just, this is really sickening. The whole thing, everything to do with the bear versus man meme, really sickening. And it's not justified by women thinking that bears are less dangerous than men, because they sure as hell would pause and think if someone had asked, would you choose a Black man over a bear? Like they could pause. So it's not about the statistics. It's not about the fear. It's not about the potential violence. It's about something else. They don't use that as an excuse. Don't pretend that that is the reason why it's justified, because it isn't. Like it's not the reason why it's justified, because you certainly wouldn't use that excuse to justify a Black man versus bear.
Right.
And so my desire to defend against, or not even defend against, like my desire to say that women are not horrible erodes even further.
Well, that was basically it. You could see on her face that she's like, it's sinking in at this point. Yeah. And he goes on to, no, we can stop it here, but he does go on to make the exact same comparison that you did, where he says, he turns Black men into Jews, and he says it again, and then she's like, oh, right. And he talks about like anti-Jewish propaganda, World War II, that kind of stuff. So, and it's basically like something that you have actually said, the war propaganda
threat narrative series.
Yeah, threat narratives. Right. So, I don't know, maybe he watches your content secretly. Yeah. I mean, or you guys are all moving in the same direction. They're definitely like spurgy looking, so they're probably like right there with you. What
do you say? We flock together because we're all...
I think that you're like
the Spurgs move and
alpha waves like move towards the same goals, and maybe at different speeds. Maybe at different speeds, but yeah.
It's the migration of the Spurgs.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, okay. So that's it. Do you have any thank yous or?
Let me check. I will check to see if we have any thank yous. I do want to thank the Great Indoors for sponsoring this response.
Thank you.
Wow. Appreciated. I'm not sure if he's put through the He did pledge, so eventually it will happen. I know that, you know, things occur, so I do want to thank him for this. He is responsible, so everybody give him a thanks in the comments for making this particular content possible.
Thank you. Come again.
All right, so I don't see any additional thank yous. Once again, if you want to send us a message, you can do so at feedthebadger.com/justthetip. Very best way to send us whatever funds you want to send us and a message that you want us to read. Very good for us because we, you know, YouTube doesn't take its 50% cut from the funds, and you don't have to send that comment through YouTube's enhancement system, which isn't a euphemism for censorship. And if you want to support the show, you can do so at feedthebadger.com/support. That's very much appreciated because you are the reason why we have managed to continue to stay on the air for 10 years. Woohoo! Oh my God, it's a long time, Brian.
One day our ship will come in. I know.
One day our ship.
And we will blow up, and then have like we'll have a studio, and we'll have guests. Tim Pool, look out! We're coming for you, Tim Pool. We're coming for you.
That day, I will be able to cross the American border. You'll see. It'll come for us.
I got my beanie on order.
Right. Okay.
All right. Is there anything else? Back to me? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe. If you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today. And please, please, please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you so much for coming on today's episode of the Fundzerker. Thank you for the people who give us these recommendations, and we'll talk to you all in the next video.
Better than you? I guess I'm going a little further than you are. Yeah, I'm fucking better than you, okay? Much better than you. You are garbage.